right, so my name is Serguei Sokolov, and today I'm privileged to present you the great work done by SBS product team and implementation teams in development of Utility DataHub Playback Manager. So for that, we created an agenda, and we're going to look at Playback Manager as part of SBS Intelligent Design Solution. We look at what challenges addressed by the Playback Manager, what capabilities it provides, and look at how it works in a typical design workflow. We'll also introduce and actually go into more details in the concept of design container. That is something new that we're trying to implement with with the utilities. And that will also allow us not to just exchange data between design and GIS, but allow it to share design data with the rest of organization, with all stakeholders. So we'll see examples of design container implementation. And finally, I will show you a Playback Manager implementation for ArcGIS Pro. So we'll see real examples, and we'll be able to execute a few jobs. So you'll see how it works. I'll start with a slide that you've probably seen already in Danish and other from SBS. We presented intelligent design solution architecture, 3 elements, critical elements. We see design, automated utility design in the center, work on asset management and GIS on the left and the right side. The real focus on this presentation will be on how to exchange and update data created in design with GIS. For that, there are 2 main components we usually implement. It's a design container and a Playback Manager. So design container allows us to, during implementation, to update, to post data from design into intermediate structure that keeps transactions or changes done in design, make it ready for the GIS team to update GIS when the time is ready. So we need to look at implementation from the work process perspective. And the second component is the Playback Manager plugin for GIS client, basically reading those design changes and playing those into GIS. Hence, that's the name a product team selected, the marketing team selected for the product. It's a Playback Manager. The best way to understand what Playback Manager does and how it works is to look at the Playback Manager and content of the workflow. So this diagram shows swim lanes with the design in the center, field and office components, GIS on the bottom, and EIM RP such as SAP Maxio on the top. So when we start design in AUD, we get, of course, details of the work order, and we get GIS features import from GIS into design and use them as a takeoff feature, so to update existing network. And when the design is ready, completed, it goes through approval, scheduling, and goes to the field. That's where the construction is done, and the network is updated and ready for updating the source system of records such as GIS. So that's really important to all utilities, and their work is done in the field. There may be some changes to how the design, how the work was designed and how it was executed. There might be certain changes done in the field. That's reflected in as-builds. So the key challenge and question, how do we take all those changes done in design and as-built changes and update GIS with update GIS to reflect what is constructed as built in the field. Many utilities, that this is a big challenge because of differences in the data model and timing that is where a feature is created and updated in the field and when the GIS technician is updating the network. So because of these challenges, many utilities settled on doing the step manually. They really take a design, drawing, overlay it, and redraw in GIS system and GIS client. However, there is a better way, and that's where the Utility DataHub Playback Manager helps to automate actually those steps. So it allows to dramatically simplifies the work done by GIS technician, and that's what we will be looking at. So Playback Manager taking the changes done in design and as built as part of this process and updating GIS network. Now we'll look at the Playback Manager in more details. As I explained, Playback Manager is a plugin installed on GIS Client. GIS Client is connected to GIS, and what's happening when the job is assigned to a GIS technician, Playback Manager allows to read data from design container published from AUD data into GIS client, visualize it, and then execute those transactions in the GIS and using GIS API. So this is a very basic automation task, taking design change and executing them into GIS using GIS API. It's a basic, but it's a very, very efficient way of automating the process of updating GIS from design. There's another component, the Playback Administrator. It's an optional component, and it allows to manage jobs and assign jobs to GIS technician. It's optional because there may be existing implementations in the utility, or there may be other way of managing jobs, and that's why we consider it an optional implementation. And I'll present you a good example of Playback Administrator in next slides. As a user interface, Playback Manager as a plugin, it really varies based on implementation, but at a high level, it contains key elements in user interface. It's, of course, it's a menu with the buttons that allow to search for a specific job or preview the job, get a list of those jobs. Then the hierarchical tree of presenting jobs and the features inside the job. And it's a job list. And then if a user selects a specific transaction or change done in design, it shows the attributes with the proposed and existing values. So if the feature was in the GIS and has been modified. So this dialog really helps end user to visualize the change, what is going to change, and what plugin will change in my GIS. And finally, there are additional elements related to like helper functions to filter jobs and select specific only jobs assigned to me as a designer, for example. And that shows really here the differences in user interface. On the left, the screenshot shows implementation of Playback Manager in the search function for ArcGIS Pro. Of course, there is one key button, which is execute. That's the only button GIS technician is expected to press and to update the GIS features. Now we're ready now to look at example, and I will this actually I will show you the end-to-end process. As a GIS technician, I can work in the GIS client, in this case ArcGIS Pro, to select my work assigned to me work order. I can navigate to and see what the changes done in design. So there's a new pad mount 3-phase transformer, and that's actually contained in a medium voltage transformer bank. So the dialog only shows us not only features but the relationships. Then I can zoom, navigate to location. It shows a polygon, design polygon, its status is pending, and I can preview features. So what is there in the design? And if my analysis of changes is, I don't have any questions, there is a button to press, execute transactions, and you see how Playback Manager reads changes published from design, creates a new GIS or updates GIS features, and in the job or a version of GIS system. And finally, it validates all features with built-in capabilities of GIS client. In this case, checks for topology, and there's no errors. So this part of created features is already part of the network. And as you can see, in modified feature, single pole did not have any height value in the GIS, but with new updates, the pole height was set to 45. That's great capabilities, and the good news, Playback Manager supported many GIS platforms. We'll see the screenshot on the right presents implementation of Playback Manager for ArcGIS Pro. Of course, we have many pre-implementation for ArcMap, ArcFM clients, and the Autodesk, AutoCAD Map 3D with industry models. What you see is, and it's very important, that the capability may look and feel slightly, may vary slightly, but the same information is presented to the mapper. It shows the work job ID and different transactions done as part of this job. And how it look and feels, it's really configurable. That's where the implementation team works with you to set how you want to present, what's the best way, how do you group those changes done in design, and can be configured for implementation. Of course, GIS Small World and Integraph GTAC is also supported. Let's do a little bit more in end-to-end process, and we're looking at Utility DataHub GIS module, and it has two components. I've mentioned the Playback Manager as part of GIS, but there's also another component, Model Mapper component, that it gets installed along with AUD as part of Utility DataHub. And as a part of the workflow, you remember we looked at the process. So designer would import certain features from GIS as a takeoff for updates, and the model mapper will read those features and do the transformation from GIS model into AUD, intelligent models, complementing imported features with configured engineering values, so the data can be properly designed and engineered in AUD. And once the design is done, Model Mapper does the reverse. It takes and it tracks, first of all the changes to GIS features, or created new features, and takes those changes and transforms back from AUD model into GIS and exports it into design container in the Playback store. So that's the logic of implementation is done in the model mapper. And when the time is right, and GIS system must be updated based on the process, the Playback Manager component helps GIS technician to read the proposed changes based on the work order ID or other search criteria, transactions from the design container, create those update transactions and update GIS store. So in this way, first of all, I want to highlight that this architecture really decouples implementation of GIS with the Playback Manager and design function with the AUD and Utility DataHub components. That really allows both systems to evolve. There may be changes done in the design and introducing new functions, new capabilities, new templates, new rules, new standards, while GIS can remain the same, or vice versa if utility decided to migrate to a new version of software or change completely platform, like many utilities migrate to Esri specialized utility network, that implementation of AUD will not be changed. And that's what this architecture enabled by the Utility DataHub for GIS. It decouples two systems, and as long as we maintain this interface, the structure of the playback transactions and the systems can evolve separately. And one of additional concepts that Playback Manager relies on is the design container. That's the place where the Playback Manager reads changes and where the module mapper from AUD publishes the design changes, and that's available for Playback Manager. So internally, implementation can vary, and for many of you who have been working with the Playback Manager, there's a Playback store. It's right in the middle. That's where all the transactions or changes, design changes, are saved in tables, size structures, or XML structures. But what we introducing, and that's what we latest implementations we're trying to help utilities to implement, is expanding the scope of design container. So design container not only includes just design changes, but also we allow to publish design features as the preview of those design features. It's not in GIS yet, but we can see those design features as a preview. We allow a place to capture field nodes, and we also added a design polygon outlining the shape of where location of where the work is going on. And the main reason is that the design container is now not only interface between AUD and GIS. It is a source for all stakeholders, authorized users who can connect and authorized to view that information. They can visualize the design that is staged in design container and use that data in the field to do updates and track data in the field. So design container is very, very powerful, very important part of Playback Manager implementation. And a beneficiary is the entire organization, because it allows to view and share designs with the many stakeholders. Finally, before we switch to real demo of Playback Manager, I would show you the Playback Administrator as a simple plugin. It can be installed along with the Playback Manager to visualize job and assign a job done in design to a GIS technician. But as I said, it mentioned it is optional. Yes, you can install Playback Administrator plugin, but many utilities wanted to leverage external existing work management systems, something that GIS team have already been using, and they just want to continue use that. And that's perfectly fine. The Playback Manager is configurable, and it really independent from how the work is assigned. As long as there is a system who would assign a link, published design job to a GIS technician, something that we can visualize in the playback dialog, that should work. And actually in the new systems, we, like for ArcGIS Pro, the design data store, playback data store was implemented as the playback polygon with XML transactions built in. So then the managing of the jobs become easy as easy as managing features on the layer. So that's also another implementation option. Playback for this section, I will present you just one implementation, most recent.
Sorry, Sergey, there was one question of clarification. Maybe other people didn't catch it. The Playback is a plugin that works with the GE Small World as a utility network geometric. Somebody asked for clarification on that. And why that's important is because we're seeing a lot of our customers switching GIS systems, either geometric to the utility network or Small World over. And the same plugin works with all the systems. So it's our product that works with the other GIS systems.
Thank you, Pat. That's very important to stress. On this next few slides, I will show enhancements and implementation for Playback Manager for ArcGIS Pro that works with utility network. But if you can see the user interface and is pretty much stays the same as in implementations we've had for GIS Small World and as Pat mentioned for ArcGIS, ArcMap, ArcFM, we're working with geometric. But there are some differences, and we're trying to leverage enhance capabilities of Playback Manager with features and feature services provided, additional capabilities provided by GIS. So we fully leverage those in the implementation for a Playback Manager for ArcGIS Pro. And one of key areas and the feedback we've heard from utilities is that we want Playback Manager to be more configurable. So my practice change, my symbology may change. Can I reconfigure the Playback Manager? And that was added as a new function for a Playback and ArcGIS Pro. And what you see on the right is a dialog showing settings for Utility DataHub add-in. And in display configuration, you can control and change. So if you want to group by transaction, so have a group saying new or modified, you just need to say true, or and if you change to false, you'll get the list of just by a feature class like pipeline devices. You can display color or feature counts next to each group. So that's as a part of settings, and as an authorized administrator, you may configure it and save, and that becomes a part of everyone's configuration. Or if you want to set it up for your personal use and you're authorized to do that, then you can save it and use it at the runtime settings. Another capability was ability to preview jobs. So it's typically we present it with generic symbology, just a pseudo graphic showing, indicating the location of features, and it's just very, very simple way of presenting, giving an overview of job. But in Pro, we have taken it to the next level, and we allowing to configure those preview with the base symbology. So if you can see here in the settings, we can look at preview lines collection, and that shows that for electric line, low voltage based on the attributes of asset type, asset group, we can select either symbol or specific configured symbology in the GIS client, in this case ArcGIS Pro. So this results in the preview that is better, can be visualized, better describes the type of job and changes done in the job, and it's really we think it helps GIS technician to better understand the proposed changes. And I want to stress.
Sorry, there was a question that came in that fits in kind of to what you're talking about right now. Have you ever run into differences in drafting standards between AUD and GIS that has limited the ability to automatically play back changes to the GIS? How do we get around it? I know you're going to show that. Is expected to have some percentage of the design manually fixed by the GIS editors. And that's kind of feeding into why you have the preview here. So,
correct. And that's a really good question. And there are two parts in the question, and let me answer those. First was if there are any differences and challenges in playing and the difference in the drafting mapping standards between AUD and GIS, and that's where yes, and that's where Playback Manager, with the help of Model Mapper, when we publish data back, as I mentioned, Model Mapper transforms from AUD to GIS, but it's not only taking care of the models transformation, means attributes change and the feature class names. It also takes care of position. So if in AUD all the features are placed on specific or an accurate geographic location, so to do proper engineering analysis in GIS, for example, lines, electric lines or structures like poles may be offset just to create a better readable GIS maps. And those offsets and changes done as part of Playback Manager, and when we press preview, they'll be reflected in map view. So you'll see how features done or with the offsets and transition done from AUD standards, drafting standards to mapping standard. Of course, if there are any additional changes or based on mapping standards, something that was not or cannot be done, I don't know, for white space management requirements, then once the job is executed, GIS technician has full ability of using GIS client to update the job and post it to live. So Playback Manager executes, manages transition from CAD standards to GIS mapping standards, and allows to leverage client capabilities to update if required. I hope that answered the question. Let me know if additional clarifications required. Now I'm looking at ability to display associations, and we said in AUD there are quite a few relationships that track attachment, containment, connectivity. Now Playback Manager allows you to view this, visualize, and as a bonus, we also allow you to view geometry for specific features, linear or transaction. So it's, again, that's just as a way to facilitate analysis of changes coming from design. And finally, this is end-to-end process. And what I want to show you is the ability of Playback Manager to merge transactions that done in design and actually incorporate as builds. So that's remember the final step where we want to update GIS features with not only design but as built features. We need to Playback Manager is capable of reading changes done in design and also incorporate as built. So if I quickly play the field change, so in this case you see a design map. I'm navigating to the location of my work order. I select the transformer, and as part of the field implementation, they installed a specific type, and we want to provide asset ID or CU for that specific transformer, the status as built, and we just need to save those changes done in the field or in any web browser. So in a playback, what's happening if I'm logged on in this case ArcGIS Pro, I see my job, I can view all these transactions, and there is a button provided to really update, get the as-built changes from the field. So I'll see my transformer and look at attributes. You can see now it shows only proposed value, existing values, and there is a new column suggesting it's a field value. So in order to update that field value, as a GIS technician, I just press a button, get my updates, and that's where it reads changes and updates, visually presents that, yes, this job has as-built values, and I can click on specific feature, and it shows me asset ID and the other field nodes. That's where all the enhancements, and we are on top of ours, so that's the last demo I want to present. Any additional questions?
Yeah, there is, Sergey, there is a question on, is it able to handle multiple projects that overlap one another? So the answer is yes. I can read a single work order into multiple GIS versions, or I can read multiple work orders into a single GIS version. So if I had two ongoing projects, work orders, I can read them both into a single version, see whether I have data conflicts, and then I could delete that version out and then report them in later. So I can import and export out as many times as I want and then delete the version. So you don't have to maintain a version, large versions in your GIS. Is there anything else to add to that?
No, that's correct, but I would also add that design container allows to visualize all the jobs in the area. They may be overlapping, and so upfront that's the case. Then you can execute multiple jobs, as you said, Pat, and the Playback Manager, and then decide what features will be promoted to as built. Correct.